Jeff speaking.
Morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
I think we're going to get started here in 1 minute. Just waiting for, make sure everybody's here. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Ryan Cohen, president of National RIA. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. Today, we're going to have a presentation with the obvious pandemic coronavirus situations that are going on, a lot of questions that everybody has. Our presenters today are going to be Jeff Watson, our general counsel, and also Charles Tassel, our COO and director of legislative affairs. So thanks again for everyone that's attending. Again, if everybody could please mute yourselves. There's a little bit of a technical issue. So the mute button is at the bottom left corner of your screen. If you could just mute that, we'd appreciate it. Any questions that you have, please submit to the chat box. You can also email Lori Hudson at National RIA as well. So again, thanks everyone for being here. I know this is a difficult time. We're all in this together. We want everybody to know that National RIA is behind everyone, and we're here for whatever needs that you guys have. I want to thank the team, Lori and Rebecca, and the rest of the National RIA team for putting this together this morning. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Rebecca McLean. Rebecca, are you there?
Sorry, just had to unmute. So I wanted to take just a moment to kind of preface our discussions today with, first of all, a thank you to our sponsors at Home Depot. For those of you who don't know, through your local RIA, we have special programs for investors with Home Depot Pro, including discounts such as paint at 20% off, rebates, and other National RIA exclusive programs. If you have questions about that, don't hesitate to talk to your local leader or give us a call here at National RIA. So thank you, Home Depot Pro, for your support for our programs. National RIA is a 501c6 trade association. We've been around about 30 years, and our initial mission is to spread the gospel of real estate investing. And as you know, the gospel means the good news of real estate investing through our local affiliates. And so as part of our mission, we have added things like legislative participation and making sure that you are informed from the national level. So to that end, we want to thank you so much for your membership at our local group level. Without you, we couldn't do what we do, and you're why we're here. I want to say, though, that you have to be evaluating your membership right now and thinking that it's more important than ever, and it certainly is. Because where else are you going to be able to find the information to stay updated? So we want to make sure that if you're not part of a local group, that you go to our website at nationalria.org. Here's the front page. You can see right here that you can find a local group. You can also stay updated with their COVID-19 updates on this page as well. So let's put this into perspective, because many people are starting to panic just a bit. And I want to make sure that we kind of understand how resilient we are as Americans. This is a graph of the US Dow Industrial Average over the last 50 years. You can see we've had quite a few dips, and many of them, so let's look at it together. So here in 32, you had a dip in July, the big one. You came back in October, came back in October, you dipped, and then you're straight back up. And that was in just the year you were able to recover. In 42, you had the dip, you were back up, and in by 46, we were, well within the height again. 49 to 50, we had the same glitch, and then the bigger one from 74, but we were back here in 75 and climbing. So we had a little bit of a lull here. We then had our 82, but by 83, we were starting to climb again, and reached major highs. You saw your 2002 dip by 03. We were back close to heading into the averages again. And then of course the really big one in 09. But as you can see, by 12 we were back, and by 12 we started climbing again, and by 14 we were basically back to where we were. So we as Americans are incredibly resilient, and none of these have lasted any more than 3 years to generally make it back, and 5 years to start climbing again. At the absolute worst, that means that our major points of being low have been 3 to 5 years. So for those doomsday sayers that say we'll never be able to make it up, we will, we always have. And many of those dips, just to remind you, even the major ones, have been able to turn around in a year. So we also saw this to be true with home prices. We've had dips, and then we have recoveries. This one has been a little bit of a longer one because housing was hit so hard, and housing is such a driver. But that's why we want to make sure you're informed so that we keep the housing sector very strong during this. The way I want you to think about this is to look at it as a slingshot moment for us all, where everything right now might be pulling back. We're going to have to react to the pullback. We're going to have to react to the things that are happening and make some necessary changes, but then look for opportunities. And we need to remember at some point, this slingshot is going to release, and we need to be ready for the new challenges and the new opportunities that it brings us. And that's what we're here to do, is to keep you on top of things so that you have that. In light of that, we're trying to make sure that we continue to communicate in a timely basis and with accurate information. You'll find information on the National RIA website. If we have legislative action that we need you to participate in, as we sent out last night, you'll see that in the Voters' Voice section of our website, and you'll get notifications on that. We have daily updates on real estate investing today in terms of kind of news and just market updates. The weekly roundup will give you a consolidation of that week's news. We have ongoing update emails for anything that's urgent, and we will continue to have these virtual meetings. We will have an actual follow-up to this meeting, and our panelists will talk about it in a moment. We'll have a follow-up to this meeting, and we expect 2 weeks. We'll be waiting for the specifics of the legislation that passes and how it affects us to prepare and schedule that meeting. Here's the website that we have. If you'll go to our National RIA website and go to legislative, you'll see the COVID-19 update, or you can just choose that link on the homepage. You see the opening information. We have so in much of that is for you as group leaders to, if any of you are on the call as a group leader, that information and CDC updates on how we have to approach our businesses as associations and our meetings, that will be updated there. The next section is for investors. And then at the bottom, you'll see our resources, communications from HUD, communications from our partners with National Apartment Association and the National Multi-Housing Council. The one thing I want to make sure that you understand is on the website, we are trying our best to, especially during at the part for investors and in the body of the COVID-19 updates, we are relying on only validated information from reliable sources. So we're talking about from HUD, from the CDC, from the White House, from other places that is verifiable and accurate. We want to make sure that we are not part of spreading any kind of misinformation. There's all kinds of liability on your part, by the way, as group leaders out there and as owners and managers of rental property, that you're not disseminating incorrect information. So please make sure that what you have is accurate and validated. You can get that through the website. For articles, though, that are coming from news sources, and we all know that some of those are better and more accurate sources than others, we are trying to make sure that we use more accurate articles. Those articles are designated as such and at the bottom of the webpage. So those articles being different than the validated information at the top of the site. Just wanted to delineate those two for you. Also, as we go forward through this, I want to make sure that we are very careful in how we talk to each other, and very specifically how we talk to the public. I have already heard currents of languaging that I'm not super comfortable with as an industry, in terms of talking about opportunities and how we can take advantage because people are going to be so terrified and so panicked. And that's not how I want us to approach this and language it. I want us to make sure that we are pulling together and understand that right now the most important thing is for us to be human, because as the slide kind of represents, I think that's how we get through this and how we grow through it together, is that we pull together and that we don't become the thing that don't let this tear us apart like we did in 2008. Investors were very much blamed for that crash, and part of it was in the languaging. I think that we allowed some of our the people in our industry to use. So what I think the accurate thing to say is that there has been maybe some overheating in lots of markets, especially the coastal markets, some other places. Overheating in the market, you saw in the charts how much we have climbed, how rapidly rents and home prices have escalated, and we knew there was going to be a market adjustment. It's terrible that this has to be what causes that adjustment. But whatever the adjustment is, there's opportunity in an adjustment, and that's what we as investors do, is we become very creative and find ways to take advantage of those opportunities. And so I think if we can keep in mind that it's time to act creatively and to be human with each other, I think that we can certainly get through this and come out on the other side with, like I said, lots of opportunities. This is going to be important as we go through and talk about things like how we make sure that we do not step on fair housing issues, and as we make maybe some concessions for our residents and our tenants. And as private lenders, how we potentially work with both our lenders and our borrowers. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to talk about some of the challenges that we may be facing, what they see ahead, and then I will try to, as we wrap up, after they have a chance to talk, we'll go through some of your questions. Let me say this though, we're not going to answer super specific questions about legal issues. One, Jeff may have a license, but Charles and I certainly do not. And he is not going to know enough about your situation in 3 lines in the chat to be able to help you. So we're going to talk in generalities. The other thing I want to say is, and Charles and Jeff are both, I think, going to emphasize this and talk about it more specifically. Things are happening so quickly that the information we give you right now, within an hour, or maybe even before we finish this call, could be somewhat modified and or clarified with the legislative process moving forward and some of the administrative processes of your state and local governments. So to that end, we will try to, in the webinar in the next 2 weeks, be a little more specific in answering questions, because we think we're going to have some better answers. But if you have a super specific situation that you're dealing with, probably not something that we're going to be able to handle on the call. You can always consult with Jeff as an attorney, or more specifically, consult your own attorney for very, very specific questions that relate to you, your state, and your local jurisdiction. So with that being said, I'm going to now turn it over to Jeff Watson and Charles Tassel and let them introduce themselves, give a moment introduction, and then let's start digging into some of the questions that people may have.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
I'll start us off here a little bit. Rebecca gave the legal disclaimer that this is not a legal proceeding or a legal advice, but I also want to comment and point out that this is also not out there for public consumption, in the sense of we're not talking to the press. This is to members, and we want to talk to members on these issues. So don't take that in terms of these are not press statements that we are making. With that, Jeff and I are both property owners. We both have been in the business for a number of years. I focus more on policy side of things and have multifamily units and have been working through the crises just like everyone else. We've got an agenda that we're going to work through. We'll start through those issues and then we'll kind of jump back into some questions and go from there. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself a little more than that?
Folks, my name Jeff Watson. A little bit of a delay. General Counsel, National RIA, real estate investor since 1994. So I've seen the dot-com boom and bust. I've seen the 9/11. I've seen the 08. I've seen the COVID-19, and I'll see the next thing that comes again in the future. Because, you know, there's two words I'm going to say right now. Hold fast. Don't panic.
Yeah.
Charles, so much has changed in the 10 days since you and I were at DC together. I mean, you just think about how much has changed in those 10 days.
You know, we were sitting down with Senator McConnell, and it was very interesting because the discussion with him, we started talking about their package that initially passed, which was an $8 billion package. And I said, publicly, it started off as a $3 billion package. And they said, actually, internally, it started off as a $1 billion package. And that's now considered phase one. Phase two was literally just signed, I think it was Wednesday night. And now we're into phase three, which is what our voter voice piece is out there on. We're asking people to weigh in because we want to make sure that folks are, you know, Congress, at least the ones that aren't self-quarantining at this point, are actually going to be voting on issues that are relevant to property owners, rehabbers, and honestly, all of us as small businesses. And that means everything from the food chain side of things, from the mortgages and the bankers, which from what I'm hearing, they're saying, hey, we're okay. We're stable right now. We're in good situation. And their position, and it's been interesting from a public relations perspective, has been very much, we're willing to work with people. They took a real beating in 2008 and 9 and then kind of ongoing. So banks especially their first response was, we're here to work with people. And I think that's something we need to take a lesson from. And this is, I just sent out a press release yesterday. And one of the comments was, we're moving beyond the transactional relationship and being human. This is not a time to be transactional. This is a time to be human. And we're going to talk through what that means in terms of how do I manage my business and manage the people inside there, which is really what it means to manage a business. It's managing people. How do I do this in a human way, in a way that's actually going to benefit all of us for the long term? To Jeff's point, I plan to be here for the next one. I plan to be here for the next couple of issues, whatever the crises are, and we're going to deal with those. So with that, we want to touch on a couple of things. And to Rebecca's point about it being a fluid situation, you might be aware that for quite a while, there's been a point out there that as long as you filed your taxes by April 15th, you wouldn't have to pay until July 15th. Well, Mnuchin is now saying from a Treasury perspective that the IRS, you ready for this? You don't have to file until July 15th. That literally came out at 10:45 today. So we're going to make sure that's all verified and get that out to everybody. But that is what the IRS is saying at this point, that July 15th rather than April 15th because of what's going on. When you've got places like California that are saying shelter in place, it's kind of hard to get your taxes together. It's kind of hard to put all the documentation together. And it makes sense to back this up. And from a virus perspective, we've all heard, I'm sure, way too much on the issues. There's a Washington Post article of all papers I would mention that actually has a good review of how things contaminate, how infections spread, and it shows some modeling, which is a good understanding. And the reason I point that out is when it comes time to deal with residents and with staff and with contractors, there's a reason for the social distancing. There's a reason for saying, you know what, we are not going to enter into every unit and talk with everybody unless there is a need for it, unless there's an emergency. And one of the first things you've got to do, though, is communicate to your residents. I just did an interview where I said there's three main calls or sets of calls that every property owner needs to make. The first one is to their banker, mortgager, and let them know, hey, I'm here, we're working on this, we know we're going to be impacted, we're not sure what the impact is yet. Get that communication started. The second one is to your residents. Reach out to them, find out how many of them are actually impacted. The unemployment rate is skyrocketing right now, and while states and federal authorities are moving in with very quick responses on funds coming back for unemployment, there's going to be a lag time. And a lot of us have residents who are paycheck to paycheck. So when 50% of the population, as the report said in December, can't put $1,000 together in an emergency situation, we know we're going to have residents that have issues. So let's over communicate with them up front and start that conversation so we know what to expect. The third call is to your residents, or excuse me, to your employees and your contractors. Because some employees are going to say, I'm not going in. And there may be some employees that you shouldn't send into situations. What does actually need to get done? And this is where communicating with your residents and your staff, what's an actual emergency? Because we all know somebody who says, oh, my doorknob's not connecting all the way in one little room, and I want that fixed right now. Right? Well, that's not an actual emergency, okay? Let's figure out what an emergency is, and then when you go through that, reaching out to that resident ahead of time saying, okay, we understand your toilet is either backed up or flooded or something. We're gonna have somebody up there. Please unlock the door and go back into a back bedroom or go back into a side kitchen. We need you to stay in a separate room so our employee can come in, handle the service call, and leave. And let me just comment on this. Sometimes people say from personal protection that they want a mask. A mask really does not help somebody who is not sick. The idea for a mask is to be on somebody that is sick, and it stops the, let's face it, the phlegm, the snot, whatever you want to call it, from coming out and being in aerosolizing and being around everybody else. Putting a mask on yourself isn't going to solve that problem. Okay.
Charles, do you think that it would be helpful guidance that what we would call emergency situations would be anything that would qualify as a health and safety category for buildings and inspections? So that would be one way people could look at it, is if this would be something that you would have normally considered a health and safety violation or health and safety issue, that needs to be the things that are being tackled by maintenance. Most other things, not so much.
Well, and a lot of municipalities will use the term immediate life safety issue and not just a life safety. And the reason I mention that is I've talked with a number of municipalities who are actually in a triage mode. They're not sending their inspectors out. They said, we'll call the property owner if there's a problem, assuming we can get through to them, communicate. We're just going to call them and say, hey, are you on the same page that this is an issue? How are you resolving it? And if it's something minor, everybody's like, yes, we'll deal with that in July. You know, whenever this thing drops off and we can start addressing things. If it's an immediate life safety issue and you're addressing it, take a picture and send it to us. That's what the triage process from city inspectors is. Now, it may be worth reaching out as a leader in your community to your local city, talking to their inspectors and finding out what their process is and making sure your members are plugged into it. That's a good way to minimize problems and hassles. Jeff and I were talking the other day, and I said, nobody wants to be that guy. And
Amen.
We don't want you
Charles.
to be that person. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to talk about this in the sense of, I saw it, one of the questions come up and it said, April 1st is coming. how strict are we going to be on rents? Well, that's where communicating up front is going to be helpful. I can tell you up front, I'm not charging for late fees right now. That is not what you want to be doing. This is about, do you want your mortgager to charge you late fees? No. Let's start with that as a basis. This is a do unto others mode. And now I'm not talking in terms of legal, I'm talking in terms of moral and ethical. And that's really where you're going to want to base your heart in these decisions. What is moral? What is ethical? And how do you move forward? Because otherwise you're going to be that guy who is the only article that the local paper reports on because they've got so little else to report on, and they're waiting for somebody to complain. Hey, this guy's filing late fees on me. I told him I was laid off. And he's trying to evict me now. This is not the time for that. This is time for workout. Don't be that guy.
Well, and I'll let Jeff address this more specifically, but I think it is a sign of things to potentially come if we're not careful that they put the eviction ban in place federally. I think they had seen things in the past that concerned them, and they honestly didn't trust us to take care of our people. And therefore, they were going to make sure that that happened. So I think ultimately, if we don't act correctly, if we don't act morally and take care of people, they will step in legislatively and make sure that we act in the way that they think is appropriate. So the surest way to have more things happen that we don't want to happen is to act inappropriately.
Completely
Jeff, you want to
agree.
expand?
Let me chime in for a couple of thoughts here. Your properties are not your assets. Your tenants are your assets. Maintain and build relationship with your tenants. That's going to be more important in the next 45 days than anything else. You could try to be that guy and go all legal, and the system will not let you do it. Instead, you're going to end up with a black eye, a bad reputation, and it's going to just cause a problem, and you're going to be that guy or that gal or that guy or that woman or whatever. So communicate now. I've already been in touch with all my tenants about what's going on. I've already been in touch with a couple of my private borrowers. I've already been in touch with a couple of my future borrowers about what's going on. So communicate, communicate, communicate. Build relationship. Take the relationship you got now and nurture them. Some of your tenants are going to display character that's going to say, man, I want to keep them. Some of your tenants are going to display character that's going to say to you, when things settle down, get normal, they may be the ones that I'm going to help them relocate. I may just make it to where they want to go live somewhere else. Now, for those of you that have been in the game as long as I have, Charles, Jane, George, some of the other longtime people in the national real world, a lot of your tenants are long-term tenants. Hang on to these long-term relationships, because I've already done the math. I would rather eat a month's rent than have a vacant unit for 2 or 3 months. Because if this market corrects as badly as some people are worried, my rents will, if for a new tenant, be less than what they are now. And why do I want to go 2 or 3 months vacant and then get a lower paying tenant when I can just work with somebody that I've had for a while and go there? If you were charging late fees in March and it was pre-COVID, fine. April, don't charge late fees. That's my opinion. You'll look better. You'll have more respect from your tenants. Here's the reality. Some of you are already sweating bullets about your April 1st mortgage payments. You're going to have grace. There's not a bank out there that wants to be that bank. They don't want to be the next Wells Fargo. Okay? Charles, when you and I were in DC, execs from Wells Fargo were getting grilled. And I could just see the stress that was coming out of those hearings. That bank, every other bank's figured it out. They don't want to be the next Wells Fargo.
Well, and
So,
to that point,
go ahead.
Jeff, one of the comments, the question was, you know, it is perfectly fine to ask your residents, say, hey, give me some proof, some example of why it is you were suddenly laid off, show that there's a relationship to COVID. Even if it is somebody who says, I'm a single mom and my 3 kids are sent home from school, I can't afford to do it. I've got to be home with them. Guess what? That's one of the results of COVID. So record that. And part of the reason you want to record that and document it is this. The Small Business Administration is going to be looking at providing loans. They're working to reach out to all of our small businesses. And you'll want to have that documentation that shows that it is COVID related, on why there's a cash flow problem, why there is no rents were coming in, or why there are, I'm just going to say this, 1, 2, 3 months of payment agreements that somebody is in arrears that you're working through. SBA is going to want to see that. That to them is the gold standard. When you can say, look, I've got a 26 unit building. In that 26 unit building, I've got at least 6 people I'm pretty sure are getting laid off in various stages of it. And we're working through that. Guess what? Now I can say, give me some documentation. Just get me something that shows it. I don't care if it's an email from your boss, if it's a letter, show me that documentation so I can take a copy of it. And I've got it in my file so that when it comes down the road for me to deal with cash flow shortages or whatever, I'm ready to deal with it.
The other piece to that too is helping, if you know that information, you may be able to help that individual. On our website, there is also a link if you're an employer, what your responsibilities and possible relief will be, because there are some tax incentives. But there are also changes to FMLA where it generally did not apply if you weren't at 50 employees. The new, some of the new regulations now apply starting at basically 1. And it does include people that are having to stay home for childcare for children that are out of school. There's some real specifics around that. You can find the specifics on the website, but make sure that you take advantage of those resources, because if you can help your residents through that, some of them want to pay. They're just panicked. They don't know who to ask. They don't know what questions to ask. Their employers don't know what they're doing yet because this is also new. And if you can help them, you may be able to keep them from being in a position that they can't pay.
And that goes also for, as an employer, if you've got residents and you may have employees that you need to say, okay, I've got some employees I need to back down to 15 hours, back down to 30 hours, back down to 40 hours for some of us. And the reality is, got it, we understand. There's ways to do that. Track it, document it. There are credits up to $10,000 per employee right now these are tax credits for the small businesses by continuing to work with these employees, even as they're working through this, time off, extended time, family leave, sick leave. Those are all new available credits for us that just passed on Wednesday. So when we say it's fluid, that's how fluid it is. That documentation is out. We just posted it Tuesday afternoon, I believe. It's passed on Wednesday. There's more information that'll be coming. But right now, the best thing you can do is talk to your banks, talk to your residents, and talk to your staff and document how you can show that it's COVID related. That's one of the best things you can do for building documentation.
Charles, it's so important to talk about proving that it's COVID related.
Yep.
When you go to start applying for some of these programs, they're going to ask for documentation. So begin collecting it now. I already know where some of my tenants work. The moment Governor DeWine closed all the places in Ohio, I knew 3 of my tenants lost their job. Whole building went empty because it's an up-down duplex. Bartender upstairs, waitresses downstairs. I knew. But that's because I know who my tenants are. Some of them I'm still going to need to get information from, particularly like the example of the single mom that said, hey, listen, kids can't go to school. You can't put them in daycare. What are you going to do? Yes. So document it, keep track of this stuff. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is know what your financial picture was before and what it is after. So we should all be keeping books. We should all be able to say, hey, listen, let's just pick a date, March 10th, before things got crazy, this is what things look like. All my rents were collected for March, or these people were late, whatever was going on. Then be able to show how COVID affected your books, how it affected your business. My rent collections were this much in January, February, and March. April was down in the cellar. May was even lower. June starts to recover, whatever it's going to be. But have that proof, because you're going to submit it over and over again, whether you're going to go for these SBA loans, because the Senate is working on something that is really enticing. If you keep your employees,
let them know it.
you can borrow up to $100,000. Don't lay anybody off for 4 months. They forgive the loan. Some of you, that's going to matter. Some of you, that may not matter. But some of your tenants, for their companies, it may matter. So we'll see.
One of the things that I want to make sure that we mention, many of you have asked, if since they have delayed or put a stay on evictions, what does that do for me on my mortgage payment? Jeff addressed that, most of those are not going to go into an anti-grace period. So you're going to have a grace period through April, basically the second week of April, somewhere around the 15th. And we should have more information by then. We are hoping, so you should have received in your email and or on your local association's website notification of a voter voice request. And what voter voice does is it puts the proposal that we have for help and relief for investors and rental owners into the hands of your congressmen and representatives. So please make sure that you participate in that voter's voice so that it's sent out. What we have asked for is to explain, and I know many of you think that it shouldn't need to be explained, that if we're not receiving income, we shouldn't have to turn around and pay our obligations, since we're not being able to collect on our residents' obligations. But we explained the details of that, how that will affect us, and then gave some solutions on how we wanted to approach that. So some modifications on the stay, asking that the stay on evictions be limited to COVID-related issues and not issues that either had started before the ban, that evictions had started to be filed, or problems had been had that were non-COVID related. So things that are non-payment related, so damage to the unit, disturbance of other residents, all the other things that we may want to evict for that would be important to be able to evict for. So we outlined those in there. Charles and Jeff did a great job, I think, in constructing that, putting it together. So if you could participate, we really need to get the attention while we're looking at stimulus packages and some relief packages coming out of Congress. We need to make sure we get to the top of that list, because not that we're forgotten, but in the avalanche of things that are coming down, we need to try to stay at the top of that to make sure that we can get a little bit of relief as well.
And one of the pieces to that is there's an interesting aspect. It's a two-prong approach. It's not only, hey, help us. It's also, hey, help our residents, because if they're in a healthy financial situation, that's going to put us in a better healthy financial situation. So that's the kind of thing that, we don't even have to connect the dots there for people, but understand that the residents being healthy financially is a good thing for all of us. I do want to go back to one thing that was touched on evictions. Remember this, typically evictions are local. Okay. That is there's a local aspect to every set of evictions. You're going to want to make sure you follow on what the rules are locally. There are some courts that are just saying, hey, we're not doing anything for a while. There are some courts that are moving forward. We just had a Supreme Court justice, the Chief Justice actually yesterday made a comment about banning all evictions is not a good idea. And the comment she said was, look, simply put, not all evictions are financially related. There are bad actors out there. There are problem situations, and you do not want to leave those festering in a community. So, and she sent the message to the judges very clearly, you don't want to just say no evictions. And that was a good piece for us because there are times that we have to get a resident out of there because if we don't get that resident out, I'm going to lose the rest of my residents. So there's some pieces of that. Now, at the federal level, HUD is saying if you've got an FHA-based loan or if you're accepting Section 8, they're putting up a moratorium on evictions. They're staying evictions in those situations. If you've agreed to take Section 8 at that point, or if you're required to take Section 8, I should say in some areas, there's a moratorium on evictions for those folks. Now, some of those folks have subsidies. The fact is, you're still going to need to sit down and talk with them and figure out where they're at. They're going to need to sit down with their housing authority. They're going to have to make changes to their certifications. That takes time. And everybody knows working with the government is not fast. The most amazing thing to me has been some of this legislation coming out. This has been breakneck speed for some of this legislation. They are tremendous response rates and coming out. So yeah, Jeff, we've been working on some stuff for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and just
6 years.
Regulatory changes. They are pushing boulders uphill that are amazing right now. So just keep an eye out on that. As more information, literally the regulations have not even been disseminated yet from HUD, other than to say, if you're in these categories, stay the evictions, we'll get back to you. They haven't even written them. Literally last Saturday, I was emailing back and forth with one of the assistant secretaries on a couple of issues. And that tells you something when the assistant secretaries are responding to emails and communicating on a Saturday and then on Sunday. That's how focused everybody is right now. And, you know, I saw one of the questions came up and said, what if you're a one-man shop? Right now, you're part of a family. And you want to reach out to those residents and let them know, look, this is where we're at. You know, you want me to be healthy. I want you to be healthy. We've got to plan this out so that if you need something, I can handle it correctly and not putting myself, my family at risk, not putting you and your family at risk. How can we best work through this and walking them through that? I think it was Dr. Fauci made the comment. He said, you know, the American people are actually doing pretty well on this. Other than hoarding toilet paper, which we'll let that go. Other than that, we're actually, you know, we've actually learned to wash our hands. Imagine that, and doing it regularly, but distancing and putting things in place. There are companies out there that are getting good kudos for reaching out and helping folks. Be that group, be that person in your community that's doing that. Those are the kinds of things we want to make sure we're encouraging.
So really quickly, I mean, the chat messages are blowing up. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to handle all of them on this call. So let me reemphasize that we'll be having another phone call in 2 weeks when we know a little bit about the specific regulations. Some of the questions are, you know, what about the $1,000 tax credit, those sorts of things. All of that information is posted on the website. You can read the specifics there on the site and know who is being affected and how that works. That could easily be changed though with some of these new relief packages. So we're going to do the best that we can to keep that information updated as we have it, and it will be posted on the site. You can read the specifics there. Other questions such as, you know,
Rebecca, let me mention this.
yes,
Nationalria.org, nationalreia.org. You can go to
correct.
the legislative section. There's a COVID. We've literally got a COVID page on there. Thank you for posting that, Lori. that's up there for folks. Go hit it. This will be, you're going to see this continue to increase. We were, as staff, communicating 9, 10 o'clock last night and been doing that all week. So it's just, this is where we're at, folks. We've got to get through this together. And just to tell everybody, as Jeff said, just kind of stand fast. Please understand, we're still at the beginning of this process. I want to kind of steel your will on this, which is, and by steel, I mean strengthen. CDC is expecting the peaks of the outbreak to be in late April to May. So what you're seeing now, whether it's California or some other areas, you're going to continue to see this escalation and the social distancing and businesses closing. That's going to continue for the next 4 to 6 weeks easily. From a financial perspective, that's the peak. As we come off from that peak, and if they have, as they say, flattened the curve as much as they can, I would expect probably an 8 to 12 week period where financially it's going to be difficult and tough. And somewhere in that 8 to 12 weeks, things are going to start to lighten up. And one of the things they're going to be careful of, we were just on a conference on this yesterday, their coronavirus has a mutation level to it, where it's actually got a strain A and a strain B. Rebecca, I don't even think I've been able to chat with you on this. The concern is reinfection. So they will likely keep things locked down for a week or two longer than, we would say, why, numbers are dropping off. And the reason they're going to hold on to it for a little longer than that is because there's extra strains out there. So if you had it, you could still recapture it and reinfect. So they're going to do that as far as keeping things tight. But that means plan on 8, 10, 12 weeks of this process going through. We've got to get through it. Now, I think, Jeff, you said this the other day, July 4th, we're going to be looking at probably a much different country in the sense of we've made it through, we've stretched our fabric, but we're going to be there. And right. We'll be on that backside of that peak, that curve. So folks, just hang in there and walk through these things and keep looking for the updates that we're going to provide as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Let me also
the fabric
say,
is going to get stretched, but don't let it get torn.
Yeah.
Folks, listen to me carefully. Each and every one of you are leaders. As a result of which, you have to be strong, clear, and confident. Be clear in your messaging and your communication. People who are worried, people who are afraid, need to hear it 2 or 3 times more often than people who aren't afraid or worried. Keep it simple, keep it kind, stand fast, be flexible with those you can be flexible. But if they're a real problem, you got to deal with them another way, okay? And you're going to have to use your best discretion. If it's simply they're not paying because they lost their jobs, work with them. But if it's they lost their jobs and then they're doing stupid stuff and tearing your place up, you got to be aggressive there. You got to reach out, follow the systems, and go the same way. But here's what we want. We want you to, each and every one of you, to maintain and run your businesses to where come July 4th, you're better for it as a result. Your books may not look better, but you as a character, as a person, as a leader, as an investor, will be better for it. That's the best I can say, because I've seen this before. I mean, I don't remember what it was in the mid-90s that took everything down. I remember the dot-com boom and bust. I remember the 01, September 11th, the 08. Real estate comes back. It comes back. And the difference here, and Charles comment on this as well, we've seen an unprecedented level of commitment from the Fed and from the government regarding liquidity in the financial markets. We're not going to see the financial tightening and collapse that was in an 08.
That's correct.
We're going to see more of a consumer inability to pay and spend. That recovers faster.
Yeah.
than the banking seizing up. So hopefully you had some reserves. Hopefully you've got the ability to work with your private lenders. Hopefully you can create a relationship with a new private lender if you have to, and let them have a piece of the action or whatever you got to do if that's what you need to do to survive. But hang in there. Think strategically. Don't react, respond. Response means you've thought it through. Reaction means you haven't. All right?
Well, as somebody just posted, the president's coming on. Governors are speaking, pretty much giving daily updates. Pay attention to them. Don't panic. This is, in a sense, this is kind of like watching the stock market go up and down every day. You don't do that. Let's move through and watch for the long haul. Folks, we're going to keep providing updates and information. If there's areas that we're not providing information on, let us know. One of the questions came through and I saw is about how are lenders dealing with this right now? Right now, lenders are looking around like, what should we do? Because they're being told by the Fed, get loans out there, get money out there. In fact, if you're sitting on money, we're going to start punishing you. They want to see money pushing into the communities. Jeff did a great analysis of that, and this is why we're going to be in a great situation. Be ready to go forward. And in the meantime, hug your kids, hug your family, reach out to your residents. I had a resident I had to sit down and cry with. It's what I'm going to do. Do you think that's going to be a problem? No, those are solutions, and that's what we need to do is work through it. Communicate, communicate, communicate. That's how we're going to get through this.
So really quickly, let me emphasize, we're going to move the discussion offline here into the unitinginvestors.org site, where it's meant for members of the local groups to be able to communicate and talk together about issues. We'll be putting updates there. The other thing is, many of the questions that you're asking need some clarification legislatively, so we'll be doing updates with that. When we do the next broadcast of this, which we expect will be no later than 2 weeks, if I can get who I need on the call and we can get some clarification, it will be within 1 week. We're hoping to have someone from Equity to talk about effect on IRAs and being able to, what about capturing rents if you've used your IRA, capturing rents back into that. Maybe someone from banking, someone from private lending. I know many private lenders actually still want to lend. They may have some different restrictions, or they may have some different questions, especially if you're trying to buy a rental property, but there's lots of money still out there available and looking for deals. The other thing is we're talking very often to our partners like Home Depot. They're trying to come up with some solutions to make sure that you can continue to work, because if you already have that property, you've started to rehab it, you're one of the few businesses that can absolutely stay open because you don't have other people in your environment probably, or there's 2 or 3 of you that can easily self-distance and be able to keep going. So we're talking about specific delivery programs, some specifically things that we can do. So, they've had to restrict their hours based on guidelines, but we're certainly going to come up with some ways that we can make sure they've got a new B2B site, which many of your groups have already talked to you about, B2B being business to business. So it's a great resource for ordering, building lists. We'll have them come on and talk to you about how to best use that in the delivery process so you can keep your rehabs going forward. There are many of these things that we need to clarify. There's a gentleman asking about his HVAC system, and if it's a central system for multiple families, how do they keep from spreading the virus through the air that's through the system? I have no knowledge on the specifics of that. We'll try to find those kinds of answers and get those kinds of professionals available for you. Check back at first at Uniting Investors. Let me see how quickly I can get a professional who can answer that with some accuracy, not me guessing. So check back in the Uniting Investors piece first, and then we'll see how quickly we can roll out ongoing communications through these kinds of webinars to keep those kinds of questions available. That's I know probably the most important, because it's needed most quickly. So we'll address those kinds of things. The lending things, we're hoping, again, that our proposed legislation will take care of some of that. So let me work through that and get some professionals on with that. Charles?
Two things real quick I want to follow up on. People have heard the term essential employee or essential business. Let me just clarify one thing real quick. As property owners and as housing providers, we are essential. Okay. Housing, food, health, we are essential. Now, with that in mind, you may have essential employees within your essential company. Okay. The person doing the accounting may not be classified as essential at the moment, but your maintenance staff is going to be essential. So make sure you're working with your local authorities, but don't think, oh, I got to throw my hands up in the air and step back. The other one was an issue. I saw a couple of chats come through on cleaning. And let me just mention this. Cleaning is essential. Physical cleaning is more important than spraying a Lysol or something around, okay? The reason that's important is the virus, unlike typical cold viruses and other viruses that last 3 to 4 hours on a surface, this virus is actually lasting anywhere from 12 to 72 hours on a surface. That means if somebody walked through with an infection that had an infection or virus on a doorknob, 2 to 3 days later, that virus can still be there. And if somebody touches that doorknob and reaches up and touches their eyes, they can become infected that quickly. So additional cleaning, that can be an essential piece to it. On our website, under the COVID area, we do have a section on there that says best management practices. Here's some things to consider. So this is one of those pieces in there that your cleaning people may be essential employees as well.
A couple other things. Question about moratorium for all renters. There are a couple cities that have asked to shelter in place. So being able to go from one place to the other, not going to be available. We're trying to keep a list of large cities, but you've got to know that we can't keep up with small areas. So I'm going to ask that your local RIA groups try to handle that information for you and continue to search your own city for that kind of information. We can show you cities that are an example of how they're handling that, and we do have that on the site, but it is only an example of how cities are handling it, not necessarily specific. Are we going to be able to keep up with all cities that are doing things like that? Also, the question about foreclosure and auction sale dates, part of that is going, I think, to be handled and clarified through, there's a moratorium on foreclosures for homeowners. And it's FHA, it's Fannie Freddie issues. All of the specifics of that are on our website. I think it's still hard to tell how cities are going to then handle foreclosure and auction sales at the courthouse steps based on how those foreclosure prohibitions are going to be moved forward. So I think that's something that your city is going to have to, Charles will tell you that he is a city council person, and they in his own area, and they're having a hard time keeping up and dealing with all of that as well. But we'll do the best that we can to let you know how some cities are handling that, and to tell you, that you need to be contacting your own city. There are so many things that SBA loan information is on the website. It specifically says SBA information. It has their guidelines and then a link to their site for the application process, has some real specifics there. And we're going to try to handle, I don't want to continue this particular piece because I know the chats can just roll on and on. I will try to, as we get as we have the transcript from this, I'll try to answer as many of these as possible, get ongoing meetings scheduled so that we can have professionals on that address this. But in the meantime, please go to the unitinginvestors.com discussion forum so that we can post this information for each other and have the discussion continue there. Any last words from Jeff, Charles, or Ryan?
So as I mentioned last night in another event, folks, hang on. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Be human. I'll say this, do some reading. Maybe it's a little bit of mind candy. Maybe it's a little bit of faith-based. encourage one another. This is the time for that. We're all humans, and we're going to get through this.
I'm going to offer this piece of advice and information from a completely different tactic. One of my family members is in the food service industry. He's on 7 days a week, 10 hours a day in a food warehouse that is stocked beyond belief, filling up trucks, going to grocery store. There is enough food in the system. Let your tenants know that. You need to know that. There is a lot of land, a lot of plenty in this land of plenty.
Yeah.
Hang in there, folks.
Absolutely. Let's all keep calm and stay connected to your local RIA groups. Listen, guys, the value of being a member is more important right now than it has ever been, unless you were with us through 2008. And at that point, maybe as well. But other than that, definitely the best time to be connected to your local RIA group. They're going to have information. They'll be sharing our information. Lori will be sending out an email with the link to this as a recording. She'll have a link to the Uniting Investors Forum. We also have, by the way, for those of you with insurance questions, if you've gotten your insurance through us for loss of rents, we'll have a link on how to contact us. Doug DeShields will be your point person for that in our organization. If you didn't get the information, get the insurance from us and our provider, we will still try to help you understand the questions to ask. So that information will be available as well. We'll try to keep this website as updated as possible and have as much information as possible. So thank you so much for your attendance at this call. Thank you for your membership at the local and in National RIA. Thank you for your support. And we pledge to be here for you, to be leaders during this time, and to keep you as informed as possible so that your business will not only be strong during this time, but will emerge even stronger as opportunities exist. Thank you so much. Have a terrific day, and we'll be in touch soon.
Peace.
Guys.
Thanks, guys.